schools in the country said the new tax policy, which would impose a devastating 25% corporate income tax on them, will hit parents the hardest. To better understand the issue, we have with us today Attorney Joseph Noel Estrada of Cocopea to tell us more about the issue. Hi, Attorney. Welcome to the program.
Good morning to you, Bonds, to your followers, readers, and viewers. Magandang umaga po sa inyo lahat.
Siguro to start off the discussion, what is this new tax rule for private schools that's been all over the news since the last month? Can you tell our viewers the nitty-gritty details of the RR 5 2021?
Yes, Bonds, ito yung Revenue Regulation 5-2021 na inisyu ng ating BIR noong April 8, no, if I'm not mistaken. Ito yung revenue regulation na supposedly mag-i-implement ng new tax rates as provided in the CREATE Act, no? So I'll just backtrack a little. Yung CREATE Act kasi, this is a law that was passed only this year also. End of March ito napirmahan ng Pangulo. And it is a law that provides lower tax rates, no? Lowering of the tax rates for corporations and enterprises. Kasama doon yung schools. No, from 10% ginagawa nitong 1% ang income tax rate. Kaya lang, nung nag-issue ng revenue regulation itong BIR, instead of lowering it to 1%, itinaas pa nito to 25%, no? Just like any other corporate. Ipinantay niya sa mga regular corporations ang mga proprietary educational institutions. So paano nangyari yon? Because in the revenue regulation, naglagay ng qualification ng BIR now for the proprietary educational institutions to enjoy the 1%, the concessionary tax rate, kailangan daw non-profit yung proprietary educational institutions. And among many reasons, that is a legal impossibility, no? Because you cannot be non-profit and at the same time proprietary.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So what are the implications of this new tax rule on the operations of private schools?
We can start number one on the pandemic, no? It will of course exacerbate the situation of the proprietary educational institutions reeling from the economic impact of the pandemic. No, kung mapapansin din ninyo, no, it's all over the news. Retroactive effect kasi itong revenue regulation na to. And then you can just imagine if it retroacts to July of 2020, no? At nasan ba tayo nung July 2020 last year? I think wala namang shielded, no, from the effects of the pandemic, no? Not only the health but of course the economic impact. So imagine, no, ko-computing yung new tax rate, no? 150% increase. So saan kukunin ng schools yon? So you can already see, it's not hard to imagine the immediate impact on the schools moving forward. No, it will affect their sustainability. And not only the schools, no, maaring yung direct impact niya sa schools, but you have many stakeholders, no, in the schools. Hindi lang estudyante, hindi lang parents, kundi pati yung mga small economies, no, that depend on school operations. So, pag nagsara yan, talagang marami talagang maapektuhan. And of course, we cannot also set aside the contribution of the private education sector in the delivery of education, no, of our country to the youth.
Okay. So yeah, you mentioned about the possible closure of more schools, right? So as of today, DepEd data shows that around 900 small private schools have closed or have suspended their operations due to the pandemic. Are we saying, attorney, that posible ba na mas madagdagan pa yung mga schools na possible mag-close due to this new tax rule?
Yeah, that is really that there's high probability na madagdagan pa. Remember yung mga nagsara na yon, last year pa ito, no? Yung current school year. And those who were able to continue their operations, talagang lang sila, they're overstretching it, 'di ba? Their resources. Talagang pinilit lang. At marami pa ring this period is very critical now kasi natapos na yung school year. We're now looking into the new school year. And then suddenly there's a new tax rule, no? Talagang out of nowhere, no, will require the schools to pay 150% increase in their rate, no, from 10% magiging 25, no, at inaasahan pa nga nila na 1% sana. So talagang it's not hard to imagine, it's really probable, no, na maraming magsasara because of this.
Okay. So let's go naman to dun sa paano maapektuhan yung mga magulang. So in one of your interviews, you said that parents will be hit the hardest by this new regulation. So I know you mentioned this in passing na kanina, pero for the parents who are watching with us right now, can you explain to them bakit sila yung mas matatamaan ng pinakamalaki nitong bagong tax rule na ito?
Because in the private school, sending the children, for their education, that is the primary duty and responsibility of the parents. No, sa private school, the operations are tuition funded, no, by the parents. It's not dependent on government subsidy. So yung cost na ito will be passed on to the parents who pay the cost of education of their children. Hindi po ba? Kasi saan ba kukunin ng schools din yung ibabayad nila in the form of taxes, kundi sa mga magulang din. Kasi alam niyo yung tax incentive, this is actually this is not only for the schools, no? When you give a tax break, it's not for the school, lalo na hindi lang sa school 'yan, no? Kundi it's an indirect subsidy to the parents para ma-absorb yung full cost, no? Para ma-subsidize, no, to a certain extent yung full cost of education. Pero ngayon, kung itinataas nila, ganun din ang kabaliktaran din, no, ang effect nito. No? So tataas yung cost of education. But Bonds, yun ang that's not the immediate fear, no? The immediate concern is kakayanin bang mag-survive unang-una ng mga schools, kasi ang immediate concern is baka magsara, no? And it's also naman is that also correct to say na once na makapagpatuloy tayo, we can just increase tuition ng for whatever rate? Hindi naman din ganoon yan, So it also requires government approval, 'di ba, ng Commission on Higher Education and the DepEd. So you cannot just increase tuition, 'di ba? And you cannot also price it outside of the capability of the parents. Hindi rin sila mag-enroll kung sobrang taas eh. So the damages are irreparable, no? Immeasurable. Hindi mo basta maka-quantify yung effect nito, no, over the entire education sector.
Okay. You mentioned yung possible na pagtaas ng tuition fee ng mga private schools. As early as now, meron na bang may mga private school na ba na nagpahiwatig na like magtataas sila ng tuition fee for the next school year because of this new tax rule?
I think meron pa ring mga nag-submit ng kanilang mga applications, no, sa Commission on Higher Education and sa Department of Education. Pero karamihan din ng mga nagpasa ng kanilang mga applications, it's just reallocating certain fees, no, na dati naman ay hindi sinisingil. Ngayon, magki-create tayo ng mga new items dahil nga tayo ay online na and remote, and then we remove some of the items that we usually collect, no, prior to the pandemic. So more on ganon. But hindi the general sentiment is not of course to increase, no, but just to cover certain costs. Ang number one diyan yung sa employee salaries and benefits, lalo na yung mga teachers, kasi kailangan din nila ng tulong, so for some of the schools, they wanted to cover that subsidy for the teachers, increase salaries, so they also need to apply for some adjustment in the fees. Pero again, may may ceiling, may cap yan. Hindi ka naman, ang number one is you cannot go beyond the inflation rate, no, regional inflation rate, among other rules and guidelines being implemented by the DepEd and the CHED.
Okay. So opposition senator want these new regulations scrapped. So would you know the status of their appeal to the BIR and the Finance Department?
Yung mga senators, I think hindi po ang isang kinatutuwa naman namin kahit papaano we're getting the support of the legislators, no. I think hindi lang yung mga opposition senators, no, kundi I think it really cuts across, no, the membership sa both houses, no, lower and the Senate. Yung last kasi na hearing sa Senate, meron talagang appeal, no, yung mga senators, especially Senator Drilon, for the BIR to suspend Revenue Regulation 5-2021. And I think they asked for 1 week, no, to revert to the Senate kung anong sasabihin ng kabilang Secretary of Finance. But up to now, I think wala. Naghihintay pa rin tayo ng sagot po nila.
Sana mapagbigyan yung appeal nila. Okay, so last month, Cocopea and the Philippine Association of Colleges and University filed a petition before the Court of Appeals to stop the new rule. Can you tell us more about this? Ano yung nilalaman ng petition na to na dinala natin sa Court of Appeals?
Bonds, I have some no limitations because the case is already pending. So in order not to violate the subjudice rule, I cannot really dwell on the merits. But what I can just share is that yes, indeed, a petition has already been filed. It's with the Court of Tax Appeals, no, not with the Court of Appeals. It's already pending determination there. Ang hinihingi lang natin doon, number one, is to stop the implementation of Revenue Regulation 5-2021. So we're waiting for the action of the Court of Tax Appeals. And pending any action, I cannot comment further on the merits. Pero this runs in parallel with many of our initiatives, administrative, with the BIR, DOF, and of course, yung appeal nga natin through Congress and the Senate. So this runs in parallel. Ito naman through judicial intervention, through the courts. So maghihintay lang din po muna tayo ng action po from the CTA.
Okay. So yeah, of course, we want this new tax regulation to be scrapped naman. But going to this worst case scenario, so if not rectified, what will be the worst implication of the RR5 2021 on private schools as well as the parents? So pinaka worst case na natin na naiisip.
I'll start with the bigger picture, the private education sector in general, and its effect, kung marami magsasara and malilimit yung contribution ng private sector. As of now, 6 million students are in the private educational institutions all over the country. Around 500,000 school personnel, including teachers and faculty. And we have, ilan ba tayo? Nasa 28 million students and learners. So malaki yung contribution ng private sector in terms of delivery of education. So kung magsasara ang mga schools, many of these students will transfer to the public school system. And it will strain government resources. Lalong mapapagastos ang gobyerno in maintaining the government schools. Kaya meron tayong tinatawag na complementarity. The private sector should complement the public education system in the delivery of education. Nasa constitution natin yan. So yun ang isang malaking impact, if we will allow this to happen. And then we go down to on the ground naman, sa mga schools. Again, as I've said, kung magsasara yung mga schools, then we're talking about the number one, the employees, the teachers. Mawawalan sila ng trabaho, saan sila pupunta? And the students, mahirap din yung lilipat sila in the middle of their program or course. At this time, very short notice na yan kung mapipilitan magsara ang mga schools. It will be a very short notice. Mahirapan yung mga estudyante na lumipat, mag-process ng kanilang mga credentials. And then, of course, yung binanggit ko kanina, yung mga other economies, small businesses that depend on school operations. Kasi, di ba ngayon pinag-uusapan na yung mga limited face-to-face and then eventually, kung makakabalik na tayo sa face-to-face, alam mo, ang umaasang makabalik, hindi lang yung mga estudyante, kundi pati yung mga umaasa sa operations sa schools, yung nagtatahi ng uniforme, yung nag-school bus or school service, yung nagpapaupa ng dorm. Lahat po ito ay nakadepende. So pati po sila ay apektado na dahil nga pag nagsara, saan po sila pupunta? And kanina nabanggit mo rin, in case makapag-survive yung school, saan naman kukunin yung for their operations, kung ibinayad na nila ito sa BIR. Again, it will have an impact on the cost to be shouldered by the parents and the students.
So yung nakikita ko dito, attorney, talagang magdo-domino effect siya sa lahat, almost all sectors na ka-related dito sa education. So yeah, so to wrap up our discussion, moving forward, are there still things that can be done to stop the implementation of this new tax rule, aside from the ones that we discussed earlier?
Yeah, Bonds, siguro I'll just echo and reiterate what the senators and some of the congressmen also asked, no? Because I think we all understand that if only the BIR, no, can suspend or temporarily, no, withdraw or clarify yung kanilang Revenue Regulation 5-2021, talagang malaking tulong po 'yon, no? It will save us time and resources of government in passing laws, no, in going through this entire process of determining kung dapat ba talaga o hindi na itaas o bawasan ang taxes para sa mga proprietary private educational institutions, no. So we join the call of the legislature for the BIR and the DOF to kahit man lang sana po i-suspend muna. As I've said, we are entering this very critical period, no? Ngayon pinag-aaralan, tutuloy po ba, magbubukas po ba ng klase ang mga apektadong eskwelahan pagdating ng August or hindi, no? So yan po ay yung pagdesisyon din nila ay nakadepende kung ano pong mangyayari dito sa Revenue Regulation 5-2021. So yun po, we reiterate our call and our appeal to the DOF and BIR, but nevertheless, we continue with our initiatives to address this concern, again, through the courts and through other measures also within the government.
Noel Estrada of Cocopea. That's it for today's episode of Rappler Talk. Follow us on Rappler.com for continuing updates on this issue. Again, I'm Bons Magsambol and this has been Rappler Talk.